I'm presenting on today is something that doesn't fully exist yet. My job here is to kind of help facilitate making it happen. I'm supposed to build out the educational and outreach programs for it and make it become something that is hopefully in the next 3, 4, 5 years, something that will really be making a difference in the community. So yeah, thank you again for letting me come here. It's really a privilege to speak to you all, and I always love talking to people who love plants. You guys are always so grounded. It's really nice people to talk to, so thank you. All right, so today, yes, I'd like to talk about 7R Ranch. We are calling this a living model of ranching and ecological resilience, and I'll kind of talk about what those words mean to us. But first, Miss Anita did such a great job. I think I've met a chunk of you in this room, but for those of you I haven't really met yet, I am a research associate and adjunct faculty at Texas Tech University. My background is in wildlife management and conservation, and specifically mammals, and if you want to get even more specifically, deer. Deer is what I tend to study most. So I did my master's on moose, which are the largest member of the deer family. You can see one right here. I was up in Alaska looking at what food they're eating up there, how much food is available for a certain population. And then I'm trying, fingers crossed, to finish my dissertation this year on elk resource selection. So here I am in New Mexico. This is a baby elk we captured, and we were following their survival and tracking how their mothers are moving on their landscape and what resources the mothers were using. And so that's my background. And as you can see, moose and elk are super transferable to Granbury. So it's been a really easy transition. But I was brought back here through my connections with Texas Tech. I was a professor at University of West Alabama for several years, and then I was asked to come back and try to head up this program. And so this is 7R Ranch. It is a 1,500-acre, fully working ranch. There are cattle actively on the ranch. And it is also almost fully restored and has been actively restored since the early 1980s and has gotten to this point where you can see some really incredible biodiversity out there. This is not a place that we have to do a ton of work to get to the point where it's hopefully functioning well. It is already functioning well. So it is this wonderful jewel you guys have in your community, right down the street essentially from you. And the credit for this effort goes to Murray Randall. This is the ranch owner who unfortunately we just lost this past December. He passed away. We were hoping to have him for a lot longer, so it was a bit of a surprise that we lost him. But he and a small crew of people put in decades of work to get this ranch to the point where it is. And then he decided to donate this ranch to Texas Tech University in perpetuity. Texas Tech is not allowed to sell a single acre of it. We are allowed to develop on a very tiny portion of it. It will remain a working ranch with a healthy ecosystem for hopefully way longer than a lot of other, definitely hopefully longer than my lifespan. Hopefully it keeps going for a while. And so what we are trying to turn it into is an actual educational center where we can bring people to this landscape and help them understand the value of these types of places in and around in areas. And so where is this? Thank you. You mentioned that it's near Guerin. So this is 7R Ranch. This red line is the boundary of it. Here is Acton, right here. And then there you can see Highway 377, and here's Guerin's nursery right there. So it is kind of right across from it, touching Fall Creek Highway right there. And I'll just kind of orient you to you can see that it's a mixture of open grasslands, and we've got some wooded lands in here. So we've got a lot of what you call ecotones, or places where two different kind of ecosystems are meeting up, ecological spaces are meeting up. This section right here is actually composed of largely introduced or high productivity grasses. This is the area where the bulk of the cattle grazing occurs during the grazing season. And what that does is it allows the rest of it to rest during the growing season, and therefore allow it to be this restored native prairie. Now they do put cattle on there, and we'll talk about why. They purposely do put cattle on there to help maintain this native restored prairie, but this whole area, the vast majority of the ranch, is actually restored native prairie. This little chunk up here is actively restoring native prairie. This is a newly acquired piece. He got it in the last 5 or so years. And there's still some pretty heavy cedar concentration, so they're kind of still working on restoring that chunk. But this whole area is functioning pretty close to the way it should be on this landscape. Now, and right there is where the educational center is going to be. So really close to Sharon, so you can just keep using that as your landmark for this. We will hopefully have an educational center right there that is open to the public and producing educational programs for K through 12 kids, college students, adult workshops, things like that. So all of that is hopefully coming. Now, I used the phrase a living model, and I've talked about it being a part of this ecosystem. So a living model of what ecosystem specifically? A lot of you probably know this, but you live in the Cross Timbers and Prairies ecosystem. And so that ecosystem, if you can find our little Hood County area right here, again is a meshing of these old woodlands, old post oak, blackjack oak woodlands, along with these prairie ecosystems. And so what we're trying to do is allow 7R to be a living model of that. That is what this area of Texas really should be. And so what does that really look like? And if you want to be like highly technical, we are technically the Western Cross Timbers and Grand Prairie ecosystems. So that's what we're trying to be a living model of. So what should that look like? It should look something like this, where you have, again, this ecotone, a meshing of woodlands blending into grasslands, patchworked across this landscape. We're not supposed to be all trees here. We're not supposed to be all open. We're supposed to be a combination of both. And in this area, you get your stands of mostly post and blackjack oak. These were the drought and fire tolerant species that made up most of the canopy in this area. And then you have your mid and tall grass prairies that are meant to be in this area. Not short grass, that's actually a different ecosystem, a little different from us, but mid and tall grass is what we should really have in this area. And they would have been dominated by little blue stem, big blue stem, switchgrass, and Indian grass. These are pretty big grasses, as you guys know. And then you also would have had, just to give you a better sense of how tall some of these grasses should be, so this is the best picture I could find of like what this ecosystem should really look like, but this is really how tall these grasses should be. True midgrass, tall grass. Some of these grasses are taller than me. Like these are big grasses that would have actually covered up bison. And bison were natural herbivores in this region long ago. This ecosystem adapted and evolved with them. And so it would have had their effect all over them. So, versus, this is often what it looks like today. If you guys are driving around on the highways, driving past the landscape, and you can see that it's got some of that patchwork, but it is a little bit different. Often what you'll see in this region is really dense red cedar, which was a plant that is native to this area, but not in this density, definitely not. And where there is blackjack and post oak, often you'll have this really dense understory. Some of that would have been natural, but a lot of that is unnaturally dense. It's a thicket, and it's really not supposed to be there. And what that's often doing is crowding out, shading out a lot of your herbaceous matter, so you're not getting nice herbaceous cover up under those trees. And so instead of good, healthy grasslands, you're getting a lot of this sometimes. And some of this has to do with poor management of cattle on some ranches. If you're overstocking cattle, this can lead to this. It can also just be cedar encroachment can lead to this kind of reduced herbaceous matter. And this situation leads to a lot of ecological problems often. So this is an ecosystem that is still functioning, but not functioning the way it really should be. It's not retaining a lot of the nutrients and moisture that we really need. And so, on top of that, you've got this issue. As you guys know, you live in Granbury. Some of you have lived here more than 5 years, right? You have seen that you live in one of the fastest growing counties and one of the fastest growing states in the nation. And so this ecosystem obviously functions very differently from the natural one that would have been here. And there are consequences to that. You know, people need homes, but there are consequences that should be considered as people are developing on this. So, what happened? How did we get from this type of ecosystem to this one? How did we end up with there? I think we all can kind of answer how this is happening, but how did we get to the kind of half-functioning ecosystem that is occurring? Well, I've been giving you hints. It has to do with bison, and it has to do with fire. These are the natural disturbance factors of this area. So bear with me. I'm a hoof-loving person. I'm going to drag you into a bison lecture real quickly here. So back in the day, you all probably know, there's an estimated population of 30 to 60 million bison that used to roam across North America. And we tend to picture them as mostly existing in, like, I don't know, Oklahoma, Montana kind of places. But they actually used to exist from Mexico up to the Arctic Circle, all the way almost fully to the East Coast. They were completely almost across the entire North American area. And they existed in herds, as we've heard, that were very large. And when you have a big, heavy animal in big, huge numbers on a landscape doing things like this, rolling around on the ground, stomping all over the place, and then leaving these kinds of surprises behind, plenty of fertilizer, you have an animal that is what we consider a keystone species, one that is actually actively making ecosystems the way they are. They were contributing to the way that an ecosystem functioned. They would come in, they trample all over the place, they churn up the soil. Things like small tree seedlings and shrubs usually didn't make it through that kind of disturbance, and it would lead to a lot of open areas with a lot of herbaceous matter that really thrived with that, where you've got that much fertilizer, that much soil aeration all coming together to lead to really healthy herbaceous growth. So these guys were coming in, often opening up areas with their movements, but they didn't just camp in one spot. They didn't migrate across the entirety of North America. We used to think that, but actually a really recent paper, not too recent, 2010, showed that based on archaeological evidence that we have on tooth enamel from these bison, these prehistoric bison that we can look at, they probably moved somewhat, just not across the entirety of like North America, not huge north-south migrations, but they were moving. They weren't staying in one spot. They were shifting in these biggish herds, couple thousand strong, across the landscape, across the entirety of North America, influencing regions seasonally in that way. So you've got them doing that. What happened? This is what happened. As Europeans expanded across North America following the railroad, there was unregulated hunting. There was market hunting is what it was called, is they would purposely hunt animals and then ship the meat back to be sold in cities and to help support people. This is before we had any of our major wildlife management goals and principles that have since protected this species. And so this is what happened. These are all bison skulls, if you guys can't see that. That is how dramatically we decimated this population. And if you look back at this image here, you can see by the late 1800s, these tiny red dots are the only locations where you could find bison in North America. So they, as a presence on this continent, this north part of our continent, dramatically shifted by the late 1800s. At the same time that we were doing that, we were also changing another disturbance factor, another very natural one. Fire is a natural disturbance factor in this region. You guys live in a very fire-prone ecosystem. Right here we're in the dark green, and I know that's really hard to see, so I kind of blew it up here. The natural fire regime in this area is for a fire to burn through an area every 0 to 35 years, as in every year or at least by every 35 years. And you would have had pretty severe fires here, stand replacing fires, as in like they could have taken out trees sometimes. But you also had your post oak and your blackjack oak, which are highly fire tolerant, fire resistant species that usually could have withstood a lot of those fires. So what these fires were often doing is sweeping through the understory, opening up, reinserting nutrients back into the soil and encouraging vegetative growth again, mostly herbaceous species, some fire tolerant shrubs, some fire tolerant trees. And what it really did was keep cedar from encroaching in. So what happened there? This is the system. If you've heard of secondary succession or the successional process of plants, you guys are probably familiar with this. What this fire regime and the bison were doing was keeping this ecosystem in this area with grasses and perennials and grasses and young shrubs. There was regular, recurrent disturbance that kept this area right here. What happened is Smokey the Bear came in, who is highly successful at getting a message across to American people that fire is bad and fire is dangerous. It is probably the most successful propaganda campaign, I don't know what you want to put it, that the Forest Service has ever put out. Now, this is a nuanced message. Some fires are truly dangerous, and actually in this area now, where you have a lot of red cedar, if cedar burns really hot, it can actually lead to unnaturally hot fires because that cedar is here. So there are complicated nuances in this. And the Forest Service has actually changed its message. You remember this message, only you can prevent forest fires, right? You can probably hear that echoing in your head. They've actually changed that now to only you can prevent wildfires. They're actually trying to distinguish between natural fires that need to be on a landscape versus fires that are uncontrollable, crown sweeping. Where I worked in New Mexico, one of the fires that swept through there was burning a football field a second at one point and just like careening through. Highly unnatural. That fire was so hot it sterilized the soil for a couple of years, and then you have everything trying to regrow from that. That's not a good fire. These were fires that needed to be here. And so because we interrupted both the bison and the fire cycle in this area, what you get is a transition. Oh, and then also, we brought in a lot of cattle and tended to kind of put them in one spot and not let them move around the way bison did. And because of those factors, you've somewhat shifted this ecosystem and a lot of its functionality over to the one that you'll see kind of in this region today. And this ecosystem over here is basically what you get when you get rid of your natural disturbance factors that kept that ecosystem in that kind of constant shifting balance that it needed. So then you add this component on top of that. This is where we are today. This is how we got there. Now, Texas A&M put together a really nice diagram here that shows the consequences of shifting an ecosystem from that constant balance tug of war between disturbance factors to the one that is like heading to the one that we often see today. And you guys are all familiar, very deeply familiar with some of these consequences. And you can trace the consequences through water infiltration rates all the way down to downstream ecology and water quality rates and water flow rates and a whole bunch of other things that are impacted by this. But just to give you like a little taste of why this matters, when you have good herbaceous cover on a land, you tend to increase the infiltration rate to about 75% to 100% of the water moisture that hits. The rain that comes down infiltrates into the soil, stays in the soil, and eventually seeps down into the water table, and plants can benefit from that altogether. The more cover you lose, the less water infiltration you get, and you get into this kind of nasty cycle where you have surface runoff, you have erosion and sedimentary removal that then contributes to more plant removal, and you get kind of a nasty catch-22 here, where plants are getting removed from the landscape, and then less water filters in, and then more plants get removed from the landscape, and less water filters in, so on and so forth. So you get into this kind of negative spiral, which then impacts stream ecology and everything else around the ecosystem. So having good herbaceous cover on the landscape matters for more than just people who love plants, and not because it just looks pretty. We're talking about ecosystem health here and ecosystem sustainability. So what do we do to fix that? How do you fix that once you've had this problem? How do you get back to an ecosystem that's functioning really well? Well, you could, if you'd like, try to bring bison back, but I don't know if you've been anywhere near them. They're hard to manage. And so what you can do instead is bring cattle onto the landscape. I know they were part of the problem, but if you bring cattle onto the landscape and you move them like bison, which we are very good at moving cattle on landscapes in ways that can actually successfully restore the landscape, you can use them basically as a bison mimic on the landscape. And then you can also bring back fire. There are ranchers who will purposely burn parts of their ranch in order to reset that fire, that disturbance mechanism. If that's too tricky for wherever you happen to live, good mimics for that are herbicide treatment, spot treating, or grubbing, actually like tearing up cedars and pushing them away, and then probably herbiciding the root structures in order to kill them effectively. So if you do these things, you can do what Murray Randall did on a landscape. And so this is what he did for 30 plus years on that landscape, is he every year actively worked to try to get that ecosystem shifting slightly more back to the way it needed to be. And he did it by carefully monitoring where his cattle were, how the landscape was responding relative to the weather that year, relative to moisture expectations, how the grasses were actually handling, and he shifted the way they were on that landscape as much as he could. And then he had to use a lot of herbicide treatments and grubbing in order to actually mimic the fire on the landscape as well. And so he was able to take an area, that looked like this, and actually worse. We don't have a lot of photos from back in the day, but when I was getting a chance to drive around with him, he described the way his ranch looked as this, but patchier, more exposed soil, more soil erosion, kind of like what a caliche road looks like. So he was able to take his ranch from looking like this with overgrown cedars and lots of caliche road, patchy grasses, and change it into this. And to just give you a sense of like how tall grass really can get, here's some switchgrass. This is the Ranger I drive around while I'm out there. So yeah, this is taller than me, and I'm not that tall, I'm only 5'5", but still, it's pretty tall grass. And so this is what true tall grass prairie is meant to look like, and we would have had midgrass and tall grass, like really big, healthy grasses. And look at that herbaceous cover. Not a speck of like bare ground to be seen. All that rain is getting captured on that landscape. All of that's going into the water table. So that's what Mr. Murray was able to do. And as I mentioned, he passed away in December, and so we're kind of taking over the reins at this point. And what we're trying to do is create 7R to be the educational research and engagement hub in this region that uses a living model, so a place you can actually go and see in person of a working ranch. It will continue to have cattle on it for as long as we can maintain it. It's meant to be a working ranch to promote ranching heritage, land stewardship, and resilient ecosystems. This ecosystem now has enough functioning components to it that if a drought comes through, it can handle it, it can weather through it, and it can recover from it. That's what we mean by resilient. So it's resilient on the biodiversity level for plants, animals, and the ecosystem structure as a whole. And we're also hoping that it will function as a restored remnant as development continues. There's a housing development that's occurring right along the southeastern border right now. It will be a restored remnant in this landscape for however this place changes into the future, and an example of how ranching can be a positive force for supporting true regional biodiversity, how you can keep that in your landscape, in your area. And we're hoping it'll be an outdoor classroom that allows people from right here, students especially, right here in the Granbury and Acton area. We're going to pull them in as much as we can, but we're also hoping to reach kids up in the DFW area. My husband grew up in Fort Worth. He has never, until I started this job, set foot on a ranch in his entire life. And he grew up in Texas because he lived in an urban landscape the entire time. There are so many kids up there that have no idea that they need to even know that this exists, let alone value its existence. And they won't know that until we show them why it matters. So we're hoping to pull kids in on that level. So you're probably thinking at this point, thanks, that was a lot of fun history and an odd amount of cow talk, but where are the flowers? And so here you go. I've got a little bit of a pop quiz for you. I've taken pictures of a variety of flowers out on 7R. Hopefully you guys will know them. I've attempted to identify them, but let me just state again, I am a deer person and not a plant person, so it's possible I'm wrong. So let's see if you guys know these. Do you know the one on your left? You guys know that one? Is it? Okay, good to know. I thought maybe a spiderwort, maybe, but is it a weed? Is it good to know? Maybe we need to be removing that one as well. What about these? I'm sure you guys know this. Woolly white. So this is a whole field of this. This is actually right there where the educational center will be. So there's been a little bit more disturbance on that landscape, more recent disturbance. Anyone know what the top left is?
Oh, that's milkweed.
No, not close. Oh, say that again?
Wine sap on the right.
Wine sap? That's very possible. Again, I could be wrong on some of these, so please let me know. This was me attempting with iNaturalist to identify them. And then you guys know wine cup mallow. I imagine you know that one. Anyone know what this fun prickly one is on the bottom left? Yes, very good. Yeah, like a spurge nettle. Yep, globe. I think it's in that. It has a couple of common names. I think globe nettle was another one. Yeah. All right. And on the far left? I think so. It's a vetch, right? Yes, I think so. And this middle one, it's a vervain, I think. Is that right? Okay. And then anyone know what this one was? Yeah. There you go. A crimson clover, red clover. Very nice. And then, of course, everyone knows this one. So this is actually planted out there. There are a few native patches, but this was planted out there. So you know your Texas blue bonnets. Anyone know the yellow one, the bright yellow one? I think so. Is that sundrops? Yeah. And then this one, I think is stiff green thread. I was having a hard time. Does that sound right? It's a green thread? Okay, that's good to know. This one right here? Yes, a mimosa, cat claw mimosa, right? So it's a mimosa type. I can't tell all the mimosas apart. I know there's a couple of them out there. And this one up here? Yeah, the Dakota mock vervain. I think this is more stiff green thread. I didn't obviously get a close enough picture for that. There you go. There's your milkweed. Where's Miss Deborah? I put it in here just for you. And then, anyone know this one over here? I don't know it doesn't show up in gardens very often. Cremeria, a trailing cremeria. The petals are kind of fleshy. It's a little bit succulent in that way. And I just wanted to show you just how much milkweed is out there. So one of the things we like to do is figure out how much monarch butterfly habitat this ranch is providing. And you can see early on in the season it's got quite a lot out there. Now there's also some really interesting seeps, and the seeps we've got some unique little plants that are popping up. I've actually seen this one in my yard though, so it may not be as unique as I thought. This is a dot seed plantain, I think some type of plantain. It's really little. We're talking about flowers that are like this like a stack of flowers that are this big. And then anyone know this one? I think it's just everywhere. It's one we tend not to probably pay. I think, yeah, I see it on the roadsides a lot. Yeah, I think it pops up a lot of places. So just to give you a sense of some of the diversity, and that was just, I went out for one day taking pictures covering, 5% of the range. Like it's got a lot more to it, but that is, we're hoping to better understand the full diversity that is out there, including wildlife diversity. And so what's ongoing right now is a lot of research, education, and outreach engagement. And these are truly my job, is to build a lot of these programs out. And so currently, as I mentioned, a lot of infield efforts are stalled while we wait for the legal transition to complete between it being Mr. Murray's property under his estate over to full Texas Tech ownership. And the reason that's all stalled is because of liability issues. I'm not allowed to bring people out until that is fully resolved, and if someone were to get hurt, that will be resolved that way. So we're paused on that, but hopefully, like they keep telling me like any day now, this should be, they've been saying this since the beginning of April, so who knows. Hopefully that'll be resolved soon and we can actually get some research restarted this summer. But in previous summers, we've set up game camera surveys where you can see our little baby deer. We've caught bobcats, we've caught coyotes, we've caught snakes, we've caught a bunch of different rodents, we've got a bunch of different birds. We've got acoustic bat surveys that we've conducted on there. There's 9 different species of bats that we've detected out there, which is really fun. Are they healthy? Yeah, so far it seems like it, but we're still analyzing that data, so we don't know like ecologically where they are relative to certain habitat types, and so stay tuned. We've got a student on that right now. And then we've been doing acoustic bird surveys. We're hoping to supplement those with like trained bird survey people this summer. And we started a press plant collection. It's a very baby one, but we will continue to build that out over the years so that we can use those as educational samples as well to help teach people about plants. So we're doing that kind of research. We're also, my job is to develop a whole lot of educational programs, as I mentioned, K through 12 students, college students. We've got some adult workshops that I'd like to be able to host. We'll probably have to host them off-site initially because, again, we don't have any facilities just yet. It's just functioning ranch places. Like we don't even have a bathroom yet. It's kind of hard to invite people out there when you don't even have a bathroom. Right now, though, what I'm doing is actively talking to teachers. So I will be I'll have a booth at the Region 11 Teachers Conference up in DFW this summer. We're going to try to actually survey teachers to figure out what are the types of lessons they would want from this place, how practically can they get their classrooms there without creating a mountain of paperwork for them or just a bunch of like hiccups that get in the way of people actually using a place. So that's what we're mostly doing right now, is conversations to figure out how to make this happen well so educators can truly take advantage of it. And then lastly, this is how I bumped into you guys. I've been trying to create partnerships with people who are already doing this kind of stuff in the region and doing it really well. And so I stumbled upon the Monarch Festival as I was looking online at different events in the area, and that's how you guys very sweetly let me come in and help with that. And then I've been able to help out with a couple other festivals in the area with people who are also already educating people on the importance of these things. And so we will continue to do that, and we're going to hopefully continue to support people who, again, like, we're not trying to take over what anyone is already doing. If anything, tell me how I can best support you. My job is to help facilitate these things in the area and create kind of mutual partnerships that way. So that's what we're doing. What are our future plans? So the future plans really is to build this educational center. So this is the 14-acre area off of Fall Creek Highway. Guarens is right here. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Guarens? Guarens. Guarens is right there. This is where we're going to develop the educational center. We're probably not going to develop almost anywhere else on the property, but just right in these little areas and up in this flat disturbed patch as well. Now, what I'm about to show you is me throwing shapes on a map. This is in no way scale to scale or in no way accurate to what's probably actually going to exist. We are in conversations right now with a gentleman who is helping us to develop actual sketches for these buildings. But this is just me doing, PowerPoint shapes on a space. So this is probably something similar to what we will eventually build. We would like to have an educational center. This will have standing exhibits about ranching skills, about ranching ecology, about wildlife ecology in this area, cross timbers ecology, native plants, all of those kinds of things. We'll actually have like an educational space where you can take student groups, classrooms at a time, help them understand all of the science behind it. And then we're also going to have research lodging, where we will have both Texas Tech University researchers who are coming out and studying ranching ecology or anything related to this ranch or using this as a property in conjunction with other larger projects. And we would love to collaborate with other universities as well who might have other questions and grants and things like that that they can also facilitate in this area. We will be building greenhouses. These will be research greenhouses to hopefully develop out specific strains that are currently present on the ranch. Grass strains is probably what we're mostly going to focus on at first, but then also I think some wildflower strains as well. And the idea behind this, you guys know, if you can get an ecotypically specific grass strain from an area where you know it's growing and plant it pretty close, pretty nearby, there's a high chance that it's going to make it wherever you put it. There's a real benefit to the genetics of the grasses that have survived and done well on this ranch, and if we can spread that genetic success to other places just in our region and allow people to also take these strains and restore their own land with them, rather than getting little blue stem from Kansas or a little blue stem from somewhere else in the country, get it from right here where you have a better chance of this genetic strain working. That's what we're going to hopefully be developing out of these greenhouses. So they're really research development, and eventually we'll be like trying to distribute those into the community or sell them. So we'll have that. Way in the future, we may try to build a conference center where we can host larger educational events in the region. We would like to have a native prairie demonstration area right there off the highway. So yes, we will be taking people on tours onto the ranch where they can actually see things, but it's meant to be a functioning, working ranch, right? Like, at no point will this whole area be open to the public where people are just wandering through. But this part will be open to the public. And if people don't have time to take a tour, they can hopefully still come and see what native prairie looks like and what some of these native plants are. And then we'll hopefully have a demonstration corral where we'll also do the same thing, but on the ranch side. Let's talk about what cattle wrangling looks like. Let's talk about what cattle grading looks like and all of those processes, or goats or horses training techniques and things like that. So we'll have a space for that. And then interwoven throughout all of that will be a native plant educational trail where we'll have specific native plants planted throughout the whole area, helping to educate beyond just the native prairie species, but a lot of the woodland species as well. What's supposed to be in this area? What are these plants? Helping people kind of start their own education in that way. So that's what we're hoping to get. Are we looking for people to engage in this process? Absolutely, 100% yes. If any of this sounds fun to you, please let me know. We need help to get this going. In the nearest term, as soon as they give me the green go-ahead that I'm allowed to take people back out there, I would love to try to coordinate a field trip with your group to see if anyone would like to come see it. And we'll just show you what it looks like and how cool it is, and we'll wave at the cows and you know, just kind of geek out about the plants that are out there. So if anyone's interested in that, let me know. Eventually, though, we will be hosting workshops on native plants and their roles in ecosystems. We're probably going to host a plant bio blitz. We're going to invite a certain chunk of people to come out and help us survey the area, probably using iNaturalist to just start we need to know what's out there before we can even save it effectively and conserve it effectively. So we need to have some basic surveys done. I would love to do some monarch habitat surveying to know to what degree we have habitat, where it is specifically, how we need to better protect it. And we will eventually need volunteers to assist with that native plant prairie and native plant educational trail. If you come to my house right now, there's a 50-50 chance that a plant you look at is alive or dead. So if it's up to me to plant this and maintain it, I'm almost guaranteed to kill it. So I need people who are good at growing plants to help with this component and help make this an educational option, in a very similar vein to the demo garden you guys already maintain so well. So this is what we are hopefully heading towards eventually. Okay, with that, thank you. That's what we're doing. I'll happily take any questions if you have any. Yes.
For the education center, all of that is designated right there. Is he grazing cattle, or the state, whoever's doing that, are they grazing cattle there right now?
No, they are not. This part, Mr. Murray purchased recently basically just to create a buffer between him and some development in the area. So he's never used this for cattle grazing. It was always meant to just be a buffer, really.
Is that a Highway 4 right up there at the top?
No, it's further up. Highway 5 is much further up. We're about a third of the way down Fall Creek Highway from the highway. Yeah, towards Acton. Yeah. Yeah, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I know that Texas A&M has collaboration with ranchers and farmers to bring back naturalization on
Yep.
the property
Yep.
by helping them bring out the plants and also,
Yep.
funding. In any
Yep.
way, is Texas Tech, are you involved in something like that also?
Yes, yes, Texas A&M has an amazing program. That's a lot of their extension services. That's a lot of what they're doing, and they do a great job at it. Texas Tech does not have an extension service in that way because we're not the land grant university in the state, but we do have other grants and research efforts. A lot of it's focused in the Panhandle right now because that's where we are. And so this would be one of our first steps into this ecosystem a bit more. But we do already have some collaborations with ranches, mostly kind of north of Fort Worth. We've got a couple, and then a couple south as well. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How close are you to the Acton Nature Center?
Oh, yeah, not far at all. Yeah.
You just back up to it?
Yeah, I think they're about 10 minutes this way.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah, they're
the
real
range
close.
itself, does it back up to
Oh.
the Acton Nature Center?
No, it's not. If I can go back to the beginning here, let me show you the big map.
Slide there, I just
Nope, up here.
the first one.
Yeah, there we go.
No, it's on the same side.
So Acton Nature Center is here-ish, if I recall correctly. They're a little bit past, you have to go past Cleburne Highway a bit.
Okay. Gotcha.
So we bump up against Cleburne Highway, but Acton Nature Center is just a little bit further southeast, I believe. Yeah, it's very, they are within reach, and we've debated whether we can do some of our adult workshops hosted at the Acton Nature Center.
Right, that's why
We'll likely we'll likely collaborate with them. They have been really sweet about some of the master naturalists that are part of that Acton Nature Center are going to be the ones that were coming out to help us with our bird surveys this summer as soon as we can get that going. They've got some real bird people there. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Just a statement. I know that there's a wildlife exemption for taxes. My daughter and husband have like 100 acres up in Bowie.
Yeah.
They have game cameras, and she does a report every month of how many deer, how many feral hogs, all that kind of stuff, and they're maintaining it all real natural.
Well, that's
And
really
so
cool. Yeah.
She's really into it, and I'm thinking, oh, that's a lot of work when you stop to think that how many cameras they have up and how many
Yeah.
times they have to.
And cameras take time to process. Yeah.
You have to look.
Yep.
And they're running 24 hours a day.
Yes. Yep. We had how many do we have out? We had 20 cameras out this past summer, and we've got 2 undergrads that are processing through all that data right now. They've got a ways to go still. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned dealing with the cedar. What
Yeah.
about the mesquite?
Yeah. So we don't have a ton of that on here. There's bits and pieces of it. The cedar's been the bigger tree that's needed to be kind of pushed back. But yes, mesquite is also encroaching into a lot of these areas. Yep. Same problem. Once you removed fire, especially from the landscape, mesquite and cedar both kind of crept in that way. Yeah. And then you've got your invasives as well, like privet, which was brought in separately as well. Yes, ma'am.
Did he actively then use fire as he was restoring? Did he reseed? So he just went back to the basics?
He did not use, right, yeah, he did not use fire. I think he tried to at one point and it got complicated, so he wasn't able to. We are hoping to do a burn this fall, again, assuming that the legal things finally wrap up. So we would like to put this back on the landscape. We'll probably burn this chunk of the native prairie, and it'll be open to the public, so people are allowed to come and see what it looks like to have a prescribed burn especially if you own property and you're worried about what that looks like. So he did not. He mostly relied on herbicides and tree grubbing in order to mimic fire. And he did do some seeding, but not in the native prairie area. He was seeding in this high production introduced grasses area. These are non-native grasses that take the bulk of the hit from the cattle in the growing season. So he uses this, the phrasing they're using is, this is your grocery store, this is your standing hay crop. So they move the cattle in here during the growing season. These grasses can take kind of a higher intensity hit, and then they move the cattle out here in the winter. And this is and so they never really use hay because of that, because they have this standing crop. And the reason why they do that is because 1,500 acres is still not big enough if you truly want to mimic how bison were moving. And so you have to kind of play with it a bit. Yes, sir.
How many head of cattle are you running?
Only 30 right now. They could probably take up to 50, and that's about the maximum you'd want to do to keep this ecosystem doing well. In drought years, you'd want to bring it down a little.
What about the deer? You're the deer expert. So
Yeah.
Are you culling the deer or having to do it? Because, you know, they can decimate all that too.
Yeah. The deer numbers, we haven't done a deer population estimate yet. We had our first spotlighting survey done last August. I was on maternity leave, so I did not see that data at this point. But we're in the middle of processing that. But we've only done one survey. You really need to do a couple years to get a better sense of the population. So we'll keep doing that, and we'll have a better sense of that in a couple years. Yeah, there is no hunting on this land currently. So no, we're not culling deer at this point. I will say, walking around, I'm not seeing a lot of evidence of high browsing damage by deer. Yeah, right. I think so. I think they're being attracted elsewhere. Yeah. So I'm not seeing a lot of ecological damage yet by the population that's on there currently.
I was just curious
Yeah.
because that's
But
different than like the bison and
Yep.
the cattle. And,
Yep.
and at some point when you have a lot of goodies there for them to have, they'll be there too.
For sure. And Mr. Murray did like seeing deer. So where the bluebonnets were is this little patch right here. He actually planted a green field for them there. Although like there's so much food, I'm not really sure they use it that often to be often. But that's where those bluebonnets were. I think some. Yes, ma'am.
The natural fires
Yes.
that existed
Yeah.
in the strip that ran from Canada to Mexico, were those started by lightning strikes? Is that
Largely. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would have been mostly, they would have mostly been summer, fall burns after the drying period. That's when ecologically those would have hit. When we do prescribed burns in this region, sometimes we'll do them in the spring, which is actually kind of a mismatch a little bit, but it depends on what your management objectives are, right? Like if you want to hit shrubs and get them back real hard, you want to do it at that first growth, right? When they're like putting a lot of their resources into growing, and then you can kind of wipe them out more effectively. So it will do differently.
Information recorded as to how, on just a lightning strike, how much acreage was burned? I mean,
Ooh, that's a good question.
Stop it, it just
Yeah.
until it went out on its own.
I believe, no, I don't know of any data that has that. The way that we know that this fire regime existed in this region is through tree coring. And so you can go to especially old trees or even some very, very dead trees that are like preserved at some level. You take a tree core and then you can actually look at the burn scars on the tree rings. And so that's how we're getting that data, but that doesn't give you a fine enough resolution for you to be like, oh, this fire that started on this date burned 500 acres or not. And Native Americans were also using fire on purpose in this landscape as well. So both factors, yeah.
So with the fires, you talked about unnaturally hot fires.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know what makes a fire unnaturally hot and why is that a significant problem?
Yeah. Let me go to, so you guys know with cedars, so this species, there we go. An unnaturally hot fire is one that the ecosystem is not co-evolved with. So some ecosystems can handle really scorching fires and they can recover from them. Some were only meant to handle really slow going, low burning, low intensity fires that just kind of like trickle across the ground. Here it seems like we were kind of in the middle. We had some pretty intense fires that could wipe out some trees, but a lot of the trees were tolerant of that, had thick enough bark that they could handle that. When you talk about an unnaturally hot fire, you're talking about a fire that can wipe out trees that are usually fire resistant. They can actually usually handle it with their bark. It's wiping them out. Or you're talking about a fire that instead of just creeping along the ground, it climbs up into the canopy. And trees are usually not fire resistant up in their canopy. It's usually their bark at the ground is that they're really good at resisting. And that's what you'll see in New Mexico a lot, is you have this problem where you have certain tree species that have really high resin components, so they have more oils in them, and that will lead to a hotter fire. And then you have too much understory because it hasn't been burned in so long, and that basically creates a ladder for the fire once it starts on the ground to run straight up into the canopy, and then you get really hot fires.
Cedar, one of the trees that has the higher
Mm-hmm.
oil content.
Yes, to my understanding.
Burn as readily as some of the other trees.
They burn hotter once they catch. Yes, they actually will make the fires hotter because these fires in this area can be more dangerous if you have a high cedar concentration.
Do you have, are there cedar there?
Yes.
I live almost opposing to where you are on the other side of 377.
Oh, yeah.
We have quite a bit of natural cedar.
Yep. In fact, almost all of this up here, the area that we're trying to actively restore, most of that's cedar right now. A lot of cedar's encroached into that area, and that's why we're trying to push that back if we can. Now, a lot of cedar is supposed to be here on some level, so I'm not saying like cedar's the evil tree that you should kill every time you see it, but the level of cedar, the denseness of it, is not truly natural to this landscape at the range that we're talking about. There probably always were patches of cedar that escaped fire for a long time and would create those nice dense cedar networks, and there's certain species, I think it's the golden-cheeked warbler, that's like dependent on those cedar networks. Yeah, and so you need some of it. You need some of it on the landscape. You just don't need it to the degree that it's encroached at this point.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that the cedar burned so hot it would sterilize the ground. And
Yeah.
how long does it take that to become
To recover.
fertile again?
So I haven't seen that here. That was my experience in New Mexico. Sorry, I just probably made that microphone really loud. In New Mexico, they have ponderosa pines, and when fires reach the canopy of ponderosa pines, you can have these really sweeping, massive fires, and that's where I saw that it was so hot that certain parts of the ground were sterilized. And from our research, it looked like within a couple years, some really really tough little herbaceous plants were coming back, like your weeds. Your weeds were actually really good at coming back in. And we're not talking about like the entire soil was sterile like the moon. It just wasn't, it didn't have the microbial activity that it would have had before the fire. Yeah, yeah.
So could you go back to that, that series of slides that, this is what it looks like today?
Oh, yeah. Sure, yeah, let me go. This will be faster. This is what it looks like today. Here.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, not that one, not the good one, the one with,
Oh, where it looks like in the region here? Yeah.
yeah, I think, you just had it pulled up.
Yeah, here we go. So this is more what it looks like
Yes,
today.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, now, my question is, on that slide on the right.
Yes. Whoops.
So, that is exposed caliche.
Yes.
And my question there is with regard to the lack of vegetation. Is that lack of vegetation there, is that a function of the lack of topsoil cover that was there, or is that a function of the caliche becoming exposed due to human and cattle activity?
I think a bit of both, right? It would be a feedback effect. To my understanding, if you have really high concentrations of cattle or other human-like disturbances, like we can come through and just scrape this off as well. But often in this area what's happening is you have really high concentrations of cattle at stocking rates that are unsustainable. They graze and graze and graze, and the root structure of those plants shrinks because they don't have enough resources to actually invest in deep roots. They're just trying to recover constantly. So you get shorter and shorter roots. And then at a certain point, patches will start to appear. When it rains, you know how it rains here, it rains pretty hard. And so it can actually erode and further widen those patches. Those roots already have those plants have short root structures. They're more vulnerable to erosion at that point, and it's kind of a feedback cycle at that point, where you get more rain, it actually erodes the plants worse. They don't have the root structure to recover. They continue to get grazed. They